Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another paranormal video to share with you guys. It is a bright, warm, sunny, sunshiny summer day, and you know, that just gets me in the mood to talk about the supernatural, the paranormal, things that make your skin crawl, make you a little nervous to go down in the basement at night when you gotta get your laundry. That got a bit specific to me personally, but anyway, here we are. Now, later this week I'm going to get into more deep dives and more current sort of things. I've also got some like internet-y ghost stories that I want to talk about, really weird, spooky things on YouTube, on other places on the internet. But for today, I just had to share this story with you guys. As you know, in my last paranormal video last week, I talked a bit about some of the ghosts around St. John's, Newfoundland. Newfoundland is an island on the east coast of Canada, and it's very old. It's got a lot of history and a lot of ghosts. Anyway, a family member of mine, when I was telling them about what I had put in that video, they reminded me of another place that's very haunted, and of one particular part of that place that's very haunted. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia is another maritime province in Canada that's located very close to Newfoundland. And in fact, when you're going to Newfoundland, if you're driving there, once you get to Nova Scotia, you have to take a boat, a ferry to Newfoundland, and it's about a, 10-hour, 12-hour ferry ride. And so yeah, Nova Scotia is like the last point of the mainland before you head all the way on to Newfoundland. Now, one of the really interesting things about Nova Scotia is that there's 4,700 miles of coastline, and along that coastline there's, I think it's either 3,700 or 3,800 little tiny islands, and like they're so small, and there's so many of them. And of course that just lends itself perfectly to so many scary stories. In fact, I think there's one book called, there's one book that I want to get my hands on that's about Newfoundland, and it's called like Haunted Shores, The Ghost Stories of Newfoundland. I want to read that and do a book talk on it. But then while I was researching this today, I saw that there's a book also called like the Haunted, or the Ghost Islands of Nova Scotia, and it's just so interesting to me. As someone that's so drawn to the ocean, and like that's where I feel most at home, that's where I feel most myself, is when I'm near water, and especially the ocean. There's just something about these stories that are connected to the water, connected to the islands, that really resonates with me, and it really spooks me. Anyway, you guys, here's the main point that I'm trying to get to here today. One of those islands is called Seal Island, and it's located in the outermost part of southwestern Nova Scotia in Yarmouth County. I have a lot of family in Nova Scotia. I have a lot of friends who after high school moved to Nova Scotia, and I know a lot of people in the Yarmouth area. Anyway, so just there off the coast in Yarmouth County is Seal Island, and Seal Island is actually home to one of the oldest wooden lighthouses in all of Canada. So Seal Island, home to one of the oldest wooden lighthouses, and also home to a ghost of a woman named Annie. Now, back in the 1700s and 1800s, back before anyone really lived on Seal Island, Seal Island became a place where a lot of times if a ship was sailing, especially during a cold, harsh winter storm, if the ship would crash or wreck in some way and sink, a lot of the people that were on the boat and the vessel, if they were lucky, they were able to get themselves to Seal Island. But once they were there, they were in a little bit of trouble because, first of all, they didn't know where they were, I'm sure. Second of all, they had no way to get off the island because their boat crashed. And so it got to a point where every spring, every spring, people who lived nearby in Nova Scotia, they would make a trip to Seal Island to go and bury the bodies of the people who had crashed and ended up on the island throughout the winter. And it just became this grim tradition, and priests and pastors and whatnot, along with residents, would make the trip over to put these people to rest. Over the years, there was so much concern about the loss of life on Seal Island that eventually 2 families moved over there, took up residence, set up their homes so that they could be there and hopefully help the people that were cast ashore after, their ships went down. And because 1 year before these families came and settled on the island, one spring they went over and found 21 different people there that had passed away throughout the winter. Like, that's crazy. And those 2 families were the Hitchens and the Crowells. I just think it's really wonderful that these 2 families were so moved by wanting to help these people who were ending up, first of all, surviving the shipwrecks and only just to die on the shores of this island. First, we must tell the story of Annie, the ghost who allegedly still haunts Seal Island to this day. Her story begins, interestingly enough, on October 31st, 1891, when she got aboard the newly built steamer, and it was called the SS Ottawa. And it was on voyage from London, England, and it had departed Halifax and was headed now for St. John, New Brunswick. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read you the bit that I have found here on the internet about it, that I found on a very, very, very helpful website. I'm going to link that website down below. So if you want to read more about this story or more about the, the ghost islands of Nova Scotia, you can. But here's what it says about what happened to Annie. I just thought it was written so well, I might as well just share it right from the site. So it says, the night was dark with drizzling rain and blowing a strong southwest gale, with heavy head sea all the way along the coast. Apparently the electric light became disarranged, and this is supposed to have altered the deviation of the compass. And although the Seal Island light had been in sight for about an hour, the Ottawa ran aground. The steamer struck Blonde Rock at 5 a.m. on Sunday, November 1st at low tide. As soon as she struck, a large hole was pierced through her bottom in the engine compartment, and the steamer began to fill with the rise of the tide. With the starboard side being broadside to the sea, with a strong list to starboard, the sea became worse and broke heavily over the ship. With her stern submerged, the lifeboats were launched, and in one of those boats were 3 men and Miss Annie Lindsay, the ship's stewardess. When the boat was about 2 ship's lengths from the steamer, a tremendous wave overturned the boat, throwing its passengers into the sea, trapping them all underneath the boat, except for 1 man who managed to climb onto the keel. After a few minutes, the mate also managed to climb onto the keel, leaving the stewardess Annie Lindsay and the other man trapped under the boat. Strong tides and waves made it difficult for the other lifeboat to rescue those in the water. But as their boat drifted in the heavy sea, the waves turned the boat upright again, and the 2 men got back in the boat. Surprisingly, the man that was trapped under the boat managed to survive, but Annie did not. After 7 hours hard rowing against the wind, the crew of the ill-fated Ottawa made it safely to Seal Island. And then what it also says is that once they made it to the island, they buried her by one of the churches on the island. So like I said, she was buried, but at a later date when she was disinterred, brought up from the ground in order. I'm not sure why that happened. I'm guessing probably just because, like, with the rearranging of the island or something, maybe they were moving the graveyard. I have no idea, but at one point later on, she was disinterred from the ground, and it looked like there were signs that she had perhaps been buried alive. So maybe they thought she had passed, but she hadn't. And I think a lot of people think that's kind of the key factor that might have her still haunting the island, the unfinished business of what happened to her and why. I'm sure that if that is what happened to her, it was most likely an accident, but still, it's so unnerving to think of. That's like one of the scariest things I can imagine, being buried alive. Like, that is too much. Can't think about it. Anyway, so the thing is too, and the way that kind of article ends, is that because of so many lives having been lost on Seal Island, if Annie is still day after day walking those shores, maybe doomed to repeat the same ill fate day after day after day, chances are she's not doing it alone. Chances are there are others there that walk with her. And I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. Anyway, you guys, I just wanted to share that quick story with you guys. The story of Annie Lindsay and the SS Ottawa and Seal Island and Nova Scotia and all of those things, because I just find it so interesting. Because, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna leave it there before I start off on any other tangents. Anyway, thanks so much again for watching, you guys. Also, if you caught Saturday's video, you might have seen that I have you might have also seen that I've got Blind Date with a Book up and running. And thanks to everyone who's already purchased their Blind Date book. I still have some left from the first pile, so if you are interested, I'm going to also put my email address, or you know what, no, I'm going to link that video down below so you can go there and get all of the details on how you can get yourself a book. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, you guys, and I will see you tomorrow actually with a Get Ready With Me. Bye, guys.